Hey, welcome to V-Explainer. Today, we're going to break down a really interesting scientific pilot study. It tackles a very modern question. What are the effects of Wi-Fi on our bodies, and could a specific device actually offer any protection?
All right, so let's just jump right in. This whole study we're looking at today, it really all boils down to one single, super direct question. And here it is. Can a device actually protect our blood from the effects of Wi-Fi radiation? Now, this is a pilot study from 2025 that set out to investigate this very thing. It's a small-scale exploration, yeah, but it uses some really interesting methods to try and find an answer.
So to try and answer this, the researchers did something a little different. Instead of your standard blood test, they used this really specific microscope technique to look for immediate visual changes in the blood of 4 volunteers, like in real time. Okay, so before we get to the juicy part, the results, we've got to get on the same page about the tools and the terms these scientists were throwing around. So let's break it down.
So the technique is called live blood analysis, or LBA. Now, what's really cool about this is that it's not like your typical lab test where they analyze a preserved sample. No, with LBA, they get to watch the blood cells while they're still alive and kicking, literally moments after the blood is drawn. So what were they actually looking for under that microscope? Well, think of your blood when it's healthy. Your red blood cells should be cruising around freely, kind of like cars on an open highway. What the researchers were scanning for were signs of trouble. First, something called rouleaux, where the cells start stacking up like a roll of coins, and then aggregation, which is basically a full-on cellular traffic jam. These two things, those were the big red flags they were watching for.
Okay, so now we know what they were looking for. The next question is, how on earth did they design an experiment to see if Wi-Fi was causing this, and more importantly, if some device could stop?
And here it is. This is the device right at the heart of the whole experiment. It's called the Lila Quantum Travel Bloc. And according to the paper, it's a pretty simple-looking thing, basically just some aluminum plates and poles, and it's not powered by anything.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Only 4 subjects? And yeah, it's a small study for sure, but they did design it with some really important scientific controls. For starters, it was randomized, and it was single-blinded, which is a fancy way of saying the participants had no idea if they were near the real, active device or just a fake one that looked identical. Using that fake, or sham device is absolutely critical for knowing if what you're seeing is a real effect.
And every single one of those 4 people went through the exact same 3-step process. First, they took a baseline blood sample, before anything happened. Then, step 2, they took another sample after that person sat near a Wi-Fi router for 10 minutes. And finally, the 3rd sample was taken after another 10 minutes of Wi-Fi exposure, but this time they had either the real travel block or the fake sham device sitting nearby.
All right, so that's the whole setup. Now we get to the main event. What did the researchers actually claim to see through that microscope? Let's take a look at the data they pulled together.
Okay, this first chart shows a really key comparison. That big red bar, that shows the average stickiness score for people who were just exposed to Wi-Fi. Now look at the shorter blue bar. That's the score for when they were exposed to Wi-Fi with the device in the room. You can see it right there. The study is reporting a pretty huge drop in those bad effects when the device was present.
And this chart here really drives home the placebo comparison, especially for that aggregation thing, the cell clumping. The red bar on the left, that's the score with the fake inactive device. And the blue bar on the right, that's with the real active device. Again, the data seems to show that the active device was linked to way fewer of these clumping effects than the fake one.
So you can't just say, it looked better. Science needs numbers. To quantify what they were seeing, the researchers used a statistical tool called Cohen's d. All you really need to know is that it's a way to measure the size of an effect. Is it a small effect, a medium one, a big one? Well, a bigger number means a stronger effect was spotted.
And when you look at their numbers, one really jumps off the page. See that one for aggregation? 1.744. In the world of statistics, that's considered a large effect size. So what this suggests is that, at least for these 4 people, the device seemed to have a really strong, measurable impact on stopping those red blood cells from clumping together.
Okay, we've seen the setup, we've seen the data, so what's the big picture here? What's the takeaway? How did the researchers themselves wrap all this up?
Well, the paper's conclusion doesn't really mince words. It's pretty direct. Based on what they saw and the data they collected from these 4 subjects, the authors straight up say that their results indicate that the device had a protective effect on the blood during that short-term Wi-Fi exposure.
But, and this is a really big but, the researchers are also super clear about the study's limitations, and that's a sign of good science, by the way. First off, a sample size of 4 people is tiny. Second, the way they scored the blood was subjective. It was based on what the researcher was seeing with their own eyes. And finally, they only looked at super short 10-minute exposures. What happens over hours or days, we just don't know from this.
And because of all those limitations, this paper isn't claiming to be the final word on the subject, not even close. Instead, the authors wrap it up by strongly recommending that bigger, more rigorous studies need to be done to see if these really interesting initial findings can actually be repeated and confirmed.
And that really leaves us with the big question, doesn't it? In a field that's as complex and, frankly, as debated as the biological effects of Wi-Fi, this is often how science inches forward. It's not usually one giant leap, it's a bunch of small, little pieces of evidence. This pilot study showed what could be a large effect, but it's only on 4 people. The journey from these preliminary results to what we'd call a solid scientific fact, well, that's a long road that needs a lot more data and a lot more repetition. It really makes you think, what kind of evidence does it take to turn an interesting observation into a confident conclusion?